The Effect of Your Thoughts on Your Reality. An original work created by Oscar Gonzalez for Biblio Studio. Chapter 1. The Invisible Origin of Reality. There is a subtle boundary separating what we believe to be real from what truly is. It is such a fine line that most people live their entire lives crossing it without ever noticing. Every thought, every emotion, every mental image you hold is shaping that invisible frontier between what you imagine and what you experience. What we call reality is far more malleable than it appears, and it all begins in a point as small as it is powerful: a thought. Giordano Bruno, one of the most advanced thinkers of his time, expressed it with a lucidity that now feels almost prophetic. Thought is the first vibration of the soul before it becomes visible. What he meant was that everything that exists, an idea, a work of art, a molecule, a universe, began first as an intangible vibration, the act of thinking. If we look through the eyes of a scientist, we see that the universe is not made of solid matter, but of moving energy fields. If we look through the eyes of a philosopher, we understand that this energy is subject to an order that arises from consciousness. Both perspectives point to the same conclusion: thought is the root of all manifestation. For centuries, esoteric traditions have upheld this same truth. The ALL is mind, the universe is mental. Thus reads the first Hermetic principle of the Kybalion. According to this teaching, everything we perceive, from a galaxy to a tear, is the projection of a universal mind, a creative intelligence experiencing itself in infinite forms. We are not separate from it, we are extensions of its thought. But what does it really mean to live in a mental universe? It means that reality is not something fixed that happens to us, but something dynamic that we co-create. The environment responds to the vibrational quality of our minds, just as water takes the shape of the vessel that contains it. And although modern science expresses it in different terms, recent discoveries seem to confirm this ancient intuition. In 2006, a group of researchers at Cornell University conducted a study that still puzzles neuropsychologists. They called it the emotional double-blind experiment. In it, participants were asked to look at neutral images, while others, from another room, projected thoughts of affection or rejection toward them. Neither group knew who was connected to whom. Yet physiological measurements showed a significant change. Heart rate and skin conductance varied, depending on the type of thought being projected, even without physical or visual contact. The result was unsettling. One person's mind could alter another's bodily state without visible intermediaries. Once again, the boundary between thought and matter seemed to dissolve. Science had stumbled upon something the ancients already knew. Thought is not a private process confined within the skull, but an energy that spreads, influences, and shapes whatever it touches. Perhaps that is why, in many ancient cultures, thinking was considered a sacred act. In Egypt, word and thought were symbols of divine creation. In Greece, the idea, eidos, was regarded as the original form from which the physical world emerged. And in Vedic India, the entire cosmos was conceived as a thought sustained by Brahma. The sages of the Eleusinian school in archaic Greece took this notion to a radical experience. During their initiatory mysteries, disciples would withdraw to an underground temple where, in complete darkness, they spent days in meditation, fasting, and silence. Surviving texts recount that they were to die in thought in order to be reborn in consciousness. In that symbolic death, the initiate released all images and judgments that sustained their perception of the world. What died was not the body, but the idea of the self. Upon awakening, they claim to have seen the formless truth. It was a perfect metaphor for what we would now call the dissolution of the ego, the mind ceasing to identify with what it perceives, only to discover that it creates it. If you look closely at your everyday life, you will see that something similar happens at every moment. Reality is not a sequence of immutable facts, it is a continuous interpretation. Two people can look at the same situation and perceive completely different things. What changes is not the world, but the observer. Every thought acts like a lens that colors experience. If you look at life with fear, you will see danger. If you look with gratitude, you will see opportunity. Not because the world is different, but because you are. The human mind is a projector, not a camera. It does not passively record what happens, but emits energetic patterns that are reflected in what we call the outside. Emotions are the frequency of that emission. Fear produces dense vibrations that attract similar experiences. Joy expands the field and opens possibilities. And although this may sound poetic, neuroscience supports it. Emotional states modify brain chemistry, the immune system, blood pressure, and even gene expression. Imagine your thought as an invisible seed. Each time you repeat an idea, "I can't," "everything goes wrong," "no one understands me," you are watering that seed with attention and emotion. And like any seed, it grows. Not because the universe punishes you, but because it obeys the instruction you give it. The quantum field of reality responds to the dominant vibration of your mind, not to your fleeting wishes. That is why great transformations never begin by changing circumstances, but by changing thoughts. Every attempt to alter the external world without revising the internal is like trying to move the reflection in a mirror without touching the face that projects it. If the root of the tree is sick, no fruit will be healthy, no matter how much you paint it. Understanding this is the beginning of a profound freedom, because it means you are not a victim of circumstances, but an active participant in the universe's creative process. You cannot control every event, but you can control how you think and feel about it. And that small daily choice, to think consciously or unconsciously, is the hinge upon which destiny turns. On a subtler level, even collective ideas act as shared mental fields. Cities, towns, and cultures generate a psychological atmosphere that shapes how their inhabitants perceive life. Thus, individual thought intertwines with collective thought, forming an invisible network of mental causes and effects. Changing your mind not only changes you, it changes, even if just a little, the mind of the world. The mental universe we live in is not an abstract idea. It is happening right now as you read these lines. Your eyes interpret symbols, your brain translates them into meanings, and with each interpretation, you are creating a unique reality, one that exists in no one else's mind. What you call I is a cluster of thoughts self-organized within a field of consciousness. If the thoughts change, the I changes too. In fact, when you learn to observe your thoughts without identifying with them, something extraordinary happens. You discover that you are not the thought, but the observer behind it. And that observer, call it consciousness, soul, energy, or spirit, is the same that pulses through all things. It is the invisible thread connecting every atom in the universe. The invitation, then, is simple yet revolutionary. Look at the world again as if every form were a frozen thought, an idea made matter. Every object, every relationship, every event is a projection of your mind and the universal mind acting in unison. If you change the inner pattern, the outer must respond. It is a law as precise as gravity, only more subtle. Perhaps the ancients lacked particle accelerators or MRI machines, but they knew something science is just beginning to rediscover. that reality is not made of things, but of meanings. That thought is the primal substance, the mold of the world, and that learning to think consciously is equivalent to reclaiming the power to create. The universe, after all, is not an indifferent machine, but an intelligent mirror. It reflects the quality of your thought with unyielding precision. And when you understand this, it ceases to be a mystery and becomes a living relationship. Because as the initiates of Eleusis taught, and as science timidly begins to admit, true creation begins when you die to the old thought and are reborn to new consciousness. Only then do you discover that you are not inside the universe, but that the universe is inside you. Chapter 2. The Quantum Field of the Mind. Imagine that the universe is not a place filled with objects, but an immense ocean of vibrant energy, invisible to the naked eye, where every particle responds to the attention you give it. Imagine your thoughts as waves sailing through that sea, creating patterns, directions, and forms as they move. This is how quantum reality works, not as a rigid and predictable machine, but as a symphony sensitive to the consciousness that observes it. For centuries, humanity believed that the physical world existed independently of the observer. Newtonian science accustomed us to think in terms of cause and effect. If you push a stone, it moves. If you light a fire, it produces heat. But in 1927, something disconcerting happened in the laboratories of Copenhagen. Physicists Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg carried out an experiment that would shake the foundations of our understanding of the universe, the experiment of observed electrons, also known as the double-slit experiment. In this experiment, a beam of electrons was directed toward a screen with two slits. When no one observed, the particles behaved like waves, creating an interference pattern, as if each electron passed through both slits at once. But when scientists placed a detector to see which slit each electron passed through, the pattern disappeared. The electrons then behaved like particles, choosing only one slit. The mere act of observation altered the outcome. The consciousness of the observer modified the behavior of matter. Reality, therefore, was not independent of the mind that perceived it. This finding shattered the classical idea of an objective universe and revealed something even more unsettling. Matter has no definite form until consciousness observes it. Niels Bohr, with his characteristic wit, said, "Everything we call real is made of things that cannot be regarded as real." What he meant was that solid matter is an illusion of stability within a constant flow of energy and information, and that information appears to be deeply influenced by the mind. Vedic philosophy, thousands of years earlier, had already intuited this paradox. In the ancient Taittiriya Upanishad, we read, "The eye that sees cannot see itself, and yet it is the only thing that sees." This phrase contains one of the deepest truths about consciousness. Visible reality depends on an invisible observer. The universe is a mirror that cannot reflect itself. It needs you, your perception, to exist as experience. When you understand this, you realize that reality is a dance between two forces, the energy that forms the world and the consciousness that gives it form. Without the observer, there is no experience. Without experience, the universe is unmanifested potential. Human thought becomes an act of quantum collapse. Out of all the possibilities existing in the field, attention selects one and turns it into a fact. But what is this field everyone speaks of? Physicists call it the unified quantum field, an invisible matrix that contains all possibilities of the universe. It is the stage where subatomic phenomena occur and, in some way, also the stage where your life unfolds. From a spiritual perspective, that field is nothing other than the universal consciousness described by ancient sages, an infinite network connecting everything with everything. Every thought, emotion, or intention you generate is a ripple in that field. It does not vanish, it propagates. Your mind is not confined within your skull. It vibrates in resonance with the fabric of the universe. This explains why we often experience coincidences that defy logic, or why certain people seem to attract circumstances aligned with their inner state. Consciousness and matter are two faces of the same coin, and what happens in one inevitably affects the other. One of the geniuses who grasped this intuitively was Nikola Tesla. He slept barely 2 hours a day, claiming that his mind worked on other frequencies while his body rested. Tesla believed the universe was a symphony of vibrations, and that thought could resonate with those waves to receive inspiration or knowledge. In one of his notes, he wrote, "If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration." Tesla was not speaking in metaphors. He literally believed that human thought was a form of energy capable of tuning into the universal field to access information. His genius did not come from accumulating data, but from his ability to attune to higher levels of perception. Many of his discoveries were born, according to him, from mental images so vivid that he could see the mechanisms working in his mind before building them. It was as if consciousness were an invisible laboratory where ideas become physical realities. This brings us to a profound reflection about our own minds. If everything that exists is made of energy and thought is a form of organized energy, then thinking is interacting with reality. It is not a private or passive activity, but a creative process that modifies the quantum field through attention and emotion. Modern studies on the observer effect go beyond physics. In neuroscience, it has been shown that consciously observing your thoughts can change the brain's neural connections. This process, known as neuroplasticity, demonstrates that the mind has power over its own physical substrate. In other words, your brain responds to what you believe, not only to what you perceive. What we call personal reality is largely the result of accumulated inner observations. Each time you interpret an event, you select one possibility from the quantum field and turn it into your experience. If you choose thoughts of fear, the field responds with signals that confirm that vision. If you choose trust and gratitude, the same field reorganizes circumstances differently. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius summed it up with a phrase that today we might reinterpret in the light of modern physics. The soul is dyed by the color of its thoughts. He was not referring to a moral metaphor, but to an energetic truth. The soul, or consciousness, adopts the vibrational color of what it thinks, and that color projects onto the world it perceives. If your soul is tinted with fear, you will see a threatening world. If it is tinted with love, you will see a world full of possibilities. The quantum field does not distinguish between internal thought and external event. It only responds to the dominant frequency. That is why what you hold within eventually manifests without. Ancient cultures expressed it through symbols. Modern science describes it through equations. Yet both tell the same story. The mind influences matter. Think for a moment about how your environment changes when your mental state changes. On a day when you feel optimistic, people seem kinder, problems smaller, and solutions more obvious. But when you are worried or frustrated, everything seems to conspire against you. The world did not change. Your frequency of observation did. The quantum field is simply mirroring what you project. The great lesson of this discovery is that consciousness is not a byproduct of matter, but its original cause. We are not minds contained within bodies, but bodies contained within an infinite mind. What we experience as I is a portion of that universal consciousness observing itself from a specific point in space-time. And if you accept this idea not only as theory but as practice, your life begins to transform. Because then you stop acting from separation, me here, the world there, and begin to act from connection. Everything is within the same field. Your thoughts are no longer insignificant. They are creative waves traveling through the very structure of the universe. When you meditate, visualize, or simply choose to think in a higher way, you are tuning into different realities within the quantum field. You are not imagining, you are selecting, and that selection, sustained with emotion and coherence, is the first step in all conscious creation. Modern physics, the ancient sages, and visionaries like Tesla converge on one essential point. Consciousness is the force that shapes the world. There is no experience without an observer, no matter without mind. The universe is a quantum mirror responding to the vibration of your attention. And when you finally understand that you are not a lost particle in the cosmos, but the consciousness that makes the cosmos exist for you, something changes forever. You begin to see the world not as something happening outside, but as a living field of possibilities awaiting your observation to take form. Because in the end, the universe is not looking at you. It is you who make it exist by looking. Chapter 3. Vibration, the frequency of your thought. Everything in the universe vibrates. Nothing is still, not even the rocks that seem immovable, nor the silence you believe to be absolute. If you could see beyond the solid appearance of things, you would perceive an endless movement, an invisible dance of particles, waves, and frequencies interconnecting. That vibration is the secret language of existence, and your thoughts, far from being mere electrical impulses, are vibrations resonating with the same energetic fabric that composes the cosmos. The Kybalion, the text that summarizes the principles of ancient Hermeticism, expressed it with a clarity that remains timeless. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. According to this teaching, the universe is not a collection of separate things, but a continuous flow of energy vibrating at different speeds. What you perceive as solid matter is, in truth, condensed energy. What you perceive as thought is subtler energy. Everything belongs to the same spectrum. Every thought you hold, every emotion you feed, carries a particular frequency. Some vibrate slowly, like fear or sadness. Others vibrate high, like gratitude or love. Your inner states emit waves that propagate through the energetic field surrounding you, and that field, the very substance of reality, responds in resonance. Just as one guitar string makes another tune to the same note vibrate, your thoughts attract circumstances that resonate with their frequency. This principle, intuitively known by the ancients, has begun to receive empirical confirmation in modern times. One of the most illustrative experiments was conducted by Dr. Masaru Emoto, a Japanese researcher who spent years studying the influence of thought and emotion on matter. In his famous rice experiment, he placed cooked rice and water into 3 identical jars. To one, he spoke words of love and gratitude each day. To the second, insults and contempt, and the third, he ignored completely. After several weeks, the results were striking. The rice exposed to loving words remained white and smelled sweet. The one that received insults rotted quickly and turned black, and the ignored jar developed grey mold, as if indifference had drained its life energy. Beyond the controversies these experiments sparked, the symbolic message is clear. The vibration of thought affects the structure of matter. If the molecules of rice or water can respond to emotional energy, imagine what the human body, composed of more than 70% water, might do. Dr. Emoto extended his research to frozen water crystals, photographing the shapes they formed according to the words or music they were exposed to. The results were astonishing. Words like love or thank you produced harmonious hexagonal structures, while words like hate or evil created distorted and chaotic forms. For many, this offered visible proof of how emotional vibration shapes physical reality. The Pythagoreans, more than 2,000 years earlier, had already intuited this correspondence between sound, thought, and cosmos. They believed the entire universe to be a symphony of mathematical proportions, a music of the spheres, maintaining the harmony of the planets in their eternal dance. To them, human thoughts were notes within that divine melody. Every emotion or word you emitted contributed to the order or disorder of the whole. To live in harmony meant to vibrate in tune with the music of the universe. Far from being poetic fantasy, this idea contains a deep vibrational truth. Sound is nothing but oscillating energy. Thought is an even subtler form of that energy. Every word you speak is a wave extending beyond hearing, penetrating the energetic fields of those around you. That is why speaking with anger or with love not only changes the emotional atmosphere, it literally changes the vibrational environment. Modern science is confirming this. Experiments with functional magnetic resonance imaging show that words of affection or rejection activate different brain regions and trigger immediate hormonal responses. It is not just psychology, it is physics applied to language. Sound vibrations affect organic matter, from cells to DNA. The same is true of silent thoughts. Even when unspoken, their energetic frequency is reflected in physiology. They alter heart rate, blood pressure, hormone secretion, and the electromagnetic coherence between the heart and brain. When a person sustains thoughts of calm and gratitude, their cardiac field becomes ordered, sending stable waves that positively influence their surroundings. In fact, the heart is far more powerful than we usually imagine. Its electromagnetic field is about 5,000 times stronger than that of the brain and can be measured several meters away. When you think and feel coherently, that is, when your emotions and thoughts vibrate at the same frequency, that field expands and synchronizes with others. The people around you perceive that harmony even if they cannot explain it. We call it good energy. But if you maintain contradictory thoughts, desiring something while fearing not to get it, the vibrations cancel each other out, generating internal chaos and erratic results. It is like trying to tune into two radio stations at once. The noise prevents you from hearing either. That is why sages insist on the need to align thought, emotion, and action. Only when they vibrate in the same frequency can reality reflect that coherence. Mary Wollstonecraft, a pioneer of Enlightenment thought, wrote a phrase that could serve as an epilogue to this principle. Constant thought is the chisel of destiny. She intuited that what you repeat mentally sculpts the shape of your life. Each sustained thought acts like a chisel stroke upon the invisible marble of reality. One blow may leave no mark, but constant repetition shapes the masterpiece. Think for a moment. At what frequency do your daily thoughts vibrate? Fear or confidence? Complaint or gratitude? Each one is a note in the symphony of your existence. If you remain long in low frequencies, guilt, anger, hopelessness, you tune into realities that mirror those emotions. But when you elevate your vibration through noble thoughts, music, beauty, or compassion, your entire environment reorganizes to reflect that new melody. It is not magic, it is resonance. Just as one string vibrates when placed near another tuned to the same note, The universe vibrates with you according to the quality of your thought. If you want to change the melody of your life, do not strike the instrument. Tune your mind. Vibration is not limited to individual thought. Human masses also generate collective frequencies. When a crowd shares an intense emotion, whether fear, enthusiasm, or hope, that energy spreads like a wave capable of altering the emotional atmosphere of entire places. It is what we feel in stadiums, concerts, protests, or temples. The collective amplifies the individual, just as a choir multiplies the power of a single voice. Understanding this changes the way you see the world. You realize that every emotion counts, that every word is a vibrational emission that leaves an imprint. If you constantly judge yourself, your body absorbs those judgments. If you speak with resentment, your environment reflects it. If you think with love, the entire universe subtly reorganizes to respond to that vibration. And if everything vibrates, you can also learn to direct that vibration consciously. Meditation, rhythmic breathing, conscious speech, music, or silence are tools for tuning your frequency. The more coherent your vibration becomes, the more stable and clear your reality grows. Because in the end, the universe does not give you what you ask for. It gives you what you emit. Your thoughts are waves, your emotions are frequency, and your whole life is the echo of what vibrates within you. Just as the Pythagoreans heard the music of the cosmos in the motion of the planets, you too can hear the melody of your own mind in every experience you live. Everything around you, people, circumstances, opportunities, is the audible reflection of your vibrational state. And when you finally harmonize your thoughts with the frequency of love, gratitude, or peace, you do not just change your life, you change the music of the universe itself. Chapter 4. The Science of Belief. Believing is not a simple mental attitude. It is a biological, energetic, and spiritual act that shapes matter and defines the course of life. What you believe determines what you perceive, and what you perceive reinforces what you believe. This silent dance between mind and world forms the invisible cycle of human reality. Every thought is not merely a reflection of what you see, but the seed of what you will see. The Taoist proverb captures it with timeless precision: "He who masters his mind masters his destiny." It does not say, "He who masters the world," or "He who masters others," but his mind. The ancient sages understood that the greatest power does not lie in external circumstances, but in the inner belief that interprets them. For the mind is not a mirror reflecting reality, it is a brush that paints it. For centuries, spirituality upheld this truth through symbols and metaphors. But in recent decades, science has begun to confirm it through measurable experiments and tangible results. Beliefs, far from being abstract thoughts, directly influence the body, DNA, and the behavior of living matter. In 1995, the HeartMath Institute in California conducted a series of studies that would change the understanding of the relationship between emotion and biology. A group of volunteers was instructed to experience specific emotions, gratitude, compassion, love, while holding samples of human DNA in sealed test tubes. What happened defied conventional explanations. The strands of DNA physically responded. When participants felt coherent positive emotions, the DNA molecules relaxed, uncoiling and facilitating genetic expression. In contrast, when they harbored negative emotions such as fear or anger, the strands contracted, blocking potential cellular functions. No external chemical agent had intervened. Only emotion, the energetic vibration of thought, had modified the structure of living matter. This was direct evidence of what was once considered metaphysics, that emotion, and by extension, the belief that gives rise to it, has the power to alter biology. Your body does not distinguish between a real threat and an imagined one. It responds to the meaning your mind assigns to it. If you believe something is dangerous, the body activates the same alarm system as in a physical threat. If you believe something is possible, the body mobilizes its resources to make it real. This relationship between thought and genetics expanded with another astonishing discovery: epigenetics, a branch of biology that studies how environment and experience influence gene expression. In 2013, researchers Brian Dias and Kerry Ressler conducted an experiment with mice demonstrating that fear can be transmitted from one generation to another without direct contact. They exposed mice to the scent of acetophenon, a substance with a sweet aroma, together with a mild electric shock. Over time, the animals associated the scent with pain and displayed fear responses merely by perceiving the smell. The surprising part came when the descendants of those mice, who had never received shocks nor been exposed to the experiment, showed the same fear reaction to the scent. The learned trauma had left an epigenetic mark on the DNA, transmitting the emotion to the next generation. In other words, emotional thought modifies biology, and that modification can be inherited. If fear can be transmitted in this way, what could a positive belief, held with firmness and coherence, achieve? How many family or cultural wounds do we carry unknowingly, echoes of inherited thoughts embedded in the very information of our cells? Science is beginning to show us that beliefs shape not only the mind but the body, relationships, and even humanity's genetic history. We are not prisoners of our genes, but authors of the script they perform. And every thought, every emotion, every deep belief is an instruction the biology obeys. The Greek philosopher Democritus, long before scientific language existed, intuited this connection when he said, "Words are the shadows of the things you think." There is no more precise way to describe the vibratory power of thought. Words are not merely sounds, they are extensions of belief. Each spoken word carries the echo of an inner conviction, and those convictions, expressed again and again, eventually materialize in reality. If you observe your own speech, you can detect your deepest beliefs. The automatic phrases, "I can't," "This always happens to me," "I never have any luck," are energetic declarations the universe hears as commands. For language, like emotion, is vibration, and every vibration seeks manifestation. When a person changes their language, they change their thoughts, and when they change their thoughts, they change their life. But believing is not about repeating empty affirmations. The conscious mind may say, "I am abundant," while the subconscious whispers, "I don't deserve it." And the body, which responds to the subconscious, will reflect the latter. Belief requires coherence, thought, emotion, and action aligned in the same direction. The power of belief lies not in force, but in congruence. The brain does not distinguish between a real experience and one imagined with sufficient emotional intensity. If you visualize a situation with faith and emotion, you activate the same neural areas as if it were truly happening. Neuroimaging studies with athletes and musicians who mentally rehearse their skills show that the brain strengthens its connections without physical movement. Believing literally reconfigures the brain. The problem is that most people believe without realizing it, but they believe in the negative. They believe they cannot, that they are not enough, that luck eludes them. And the body, obediently, produces the hormones and behaviors consistent with those beliefs. What we believe about ourselves determines our energy level, our way of walking, our tone of voice, even our posture. Every cell listens to what you think. When you maintain elevated thoughts, Your cells vibrate in coherence. When you feed thoughts of hopelessness, your cells fall into chaos. The mind is the conductor, the body, the symphony performing the score. The HeartMath Institute coined a fascinating concept: heart coherence, the state in which the heart, brain, and emotions work in unison. When you experience love, gratitude, or compassion, the waves of the heart become smooth and rhythmic. That harmonious rhythm not only improves health, but also influences the electromagnetic environment around you. Your deepest beliefs, the ones you feel in your heart, emit a measurable field of influence. This means believing with the mind is not enough. You must believe with the heart. Intellectual thought creates intention. Emotion energizes it. When both unite, the field of reality reorganizes to reflect that coherent vibration. That is why great personal transformations often occur when rational thought surrenders to a deep conviction. It is then that the miracle, which is nothing more than a new frequency of coherence, becomes possible. To believe, in its highest sense, is not to wait for something to happen, but to know that it is already happening on an invisible level and to act accordingly. It is to live as if the result were already true, not because you see it, but because you feel it. That is the science of belief. When emotion becomes evidence before evidence appears. What we call reality today is nothing but the accumulated result of our collective beliefs. If millions of people believe in fear, the world fills with fear. If they believe in compassion, the world softens. Quantum physics reminds us that the observer participates in the observed phenomenon. Human history is not a written destiny, but a shared belief in constant rewriting. Your body is the laboratory, your mind the instrument, and your beliefs the experiments. Every day, you are testing within yourself the power of what you think. When you choose to believe in health, abundance, or peace, your cells register it, your DNA translates it, and your environment reflects it. The next time you doubt yourself, remember that every thought is both a biological command and an energetic signal to the universe. Your words, as Democritus said, are the shadows of your thoughts. So watch your shadows, for from them arises the shape of your world. For faith is not a religious act, it is a technology of consciousness. And when you learn to use it wisely, the miracle ceases to be something you wait for and becomes something you choose. Chapter 5. The Mirror of the Observer. When you look into a mirror, what you see is not truly you, not in the deepest sense. You see a projection of light, a surface that returns your own inverted image, and yet you trust it. You accept that this reflection represents you, even though it cannot touch you, embrace you, or feel as you do. Reality works the same way, as an immense multidimensional mirror that reflects not your body, but your consciousness. Everything you experience, people, places, circumstances, is a symbolic reflection of what happens within you. The mind does not passively observe the world, it generates it at every instant through its perception. We do not see things as they are, but as we are at the moment of seeing them. The external world is the visible echo of your inner states. Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges intuited this truth in his famous paradox. Every reflection contains infinite reflections that never reach the real. In a room full of facing mirrors, each image multiplies infinitely, but none is the original. The same happens with human consciousness. Every thought projects an image, and each image generates new interpretations without ever capturing the thing itself. Reality is not an objective fact, but a play of mirrors feeding one another. Imagine for a moment that life is a living mirror, returning what you believe and feel. If you look at yourself with contempt, the reflection will be cruel. If you look with love, the reflection softens. This does not mean that circumstances are punishments or rewards, but vibrational responses. The universe does not judge, it merely reflects. Tibetan Buddhism describes this principle as the paradox of the empty mirror. The universe is a perfect mirror that retains no image, yet faithfully reflects everything that appears before it. It is empty because it has no identity of its own, and it is a mirror because it precisely reproduces the content of the mind. When a person projects fear, the world appears threatening. When they project peace, the world becomes kind, not because the world changes, but because the mind that observes it does. This reflective emptiness is the essence of consciousness. It has no form, but it takes the form of your thoughts. It has no color, but it is tinted by your emotions. Every thought you send into the mental space bounces off this cosmic mirror and returns to you transformed into experience. It is the law of universal reflection. What you see outside is what vibrates inside. Carl Jung, the great explorer of the soul, expressed it another way. What you resist persists. What you accept transforms. This phrase holds the secret of how the universe's mirror works. When you resist something, a feeling, a person, a situation, you reinforce its reflection. It is like pressing your face against a mirror to try to erase your image. The more force you apply, the clearer the reflection becomes. Only when you relax your resistance and accept what you see does the image change. Acceptance is not surrender. It is recognition of the reflection as your own. If something in the world bothers you, do not fight the mirror. Observe what part of you is projecting it. Everything you reject binds you. Everything you acknowledge frees you. The moment you understand that the external shadows are parts of your mind seeking to be seen, the mirror ceases to be an enemy and becomes a teacher. Ancient traditions understood this symbolically. The Celtic Druids, for example, taught that trees were sentient beings that listened to human thoughts and echoed them back. They believed that if someone thought with anger near a forest, the trees would creak restlessly. If they thought with serenity, the wind through the leaves would sound harmonious. Perhaps it was a metaphor, or perhaps they knew more about vibration and resonance than we imagine. What matters is that they sensed an essential truth. The environment responds to the frequency of your mind. Think of an ordinary day. You leave home in a rush and frustration, and everything seems to conspire against you. Traffic stalls, people irritate you, time stretches endlessly. But on another day, taking the same route calmly, everything flows. The traffic is the same. You are not. What changed was your vibrational state, your observer frequency. The mirror of the world reflected that difference. We often say, "This makes me feel bad," but in reality it's the opposite. What you feel makes that seem bad. The world has no intrinsic quality. You interpret it. That is why two people in the same situation can live opposite experiences. One sees a problem, the other an opportunity. The difference lies not outside, but in the inner mirror. This principle is not meant to blame you for your experiences, but to remind you of your power over them. If the universe reflects your mind, then changing your perception is the most direct way to change your life. And that transformation begins with conscious observation. When you observe your thoughts without judging them, you discover the space where they arise and fade away. That space is the empty mirror the Tibetan sages spoke of. It has no limits, yet it contains everything. When you recognize it, you cease to see yourself as the reflected image and recognize yourself as the surface that reflects. There arises true freedom. You are not the content of your mind, but the consciousness that observes it. In that state, life ceases to be a sequence of events to which you react and becomes a dialogue between your inner world and the universe. Every experience speaks to you, every obstacle reveals something about you, every person is a messenger of the reflection you project. There are no enemies and no coincidences, only mirrors. Even suffering serves a purpose. It is the most polished mirror we have, for it starkly shows the parts of us that need integration. Resisting it only amplifies its echo, accepting it dissolves it. As Jung said, what is accepted transforms. We can illustrate this principle with something as ordinary as human relationships. If you repeatedly encounter people who don't value you, perhaps the mirror is showing your own difficulty in valuing yourself. If you find yourself surrounded by conflict, maybe the inner vibration of struggle is still alive in you. The outer world only responds to the signal you emit. When you change your frequency, the reflection inevitably changes. Quantum physics also supports this view, though in different language. The observer participates in the observed phenomenon. There is no separation between subject and object. Ultimately, the universe is a vast network of observers observing themselves, and every observation, every thought, collapses one possibility among thousands. In that sense, the mirror of the world not only reflects your mind, it amplifies it. To live from this understanding is to live awake. It means accepting that what you see is information about yourself, not to punish you, but to guide you. Each day, the universe shows you your state of consciousness in images. If something repeats, it is because the lesson has not yet been learned. If something disappears, it is because it has already been integrated. Deep down, we are all seeking to see ourselves, and life offers us infinite reflections to do so. But most people remain hypnotized by the surface, not recognizing that the light comes from within. Spiritual awakening is nothing more than turning the gaze from the reflection toward the source. When you do, something miraculous happens. You stop asking the world to change and begin using it as a mirror for your evolution. Every situation becomes a teacher, every encounter a reminder, every obstacle an opportunity to adjust your vibration. There is no longer chance, only correspondence. The Druids said that forests were the mirrors of the soul, and perhaps they were right. If you enter the silence of a forest, you perceive something words cannot translate, a subtle echo responding to your inner state. It is the same voice life gives back to you when you listen attentively. For the universe, like that ancient forest, has no face of its own. It only reflects yours. And when you learn to smile at it without fear, the mirror smiles back. Chapter 6. The Creative Power of Attention. We live surrounded by infinite possibilities, yet only a few become real for us. Every day, thousands of opportunities, ideas, signals, and possible paths pass before our eyes. However, our mind selects only a handful, and those are what we call my life. This invisible and constant selection is the most powerful creative act we perform, the act of paying attention. Where you place your attention, you place your energy. This phrase, which sums up both the Hermetic principles of the Kybalion and the modern teachings of quantum neuroscience, holds a truth that changes how we understand reality. Attention is not passive. It is not merely looking or noticing. It is a force that gives life to whatever it touches. What you observe expands. What you ignore withers. Attention is the sun that makes the seeds of your experience grow or die. In practice, this means that whatever you focus on becomes your dominant reality. If you devote your mental energy to problems, you enlarge them. If you devote it to solutions, you attract them. If you focus on lack, you tune in to the frequency of scarcity. If you focus on gratitude, you synchronize with abundance. not because the universe rewards or punishes you, but because attention is the filter through which you choose which version of the world to inhabit. This principle, which may sound mystical, has scientific backing. At Princeton University, for over 2 decades, a group of researchers led by Robert Jahn and Brenda Dunn conducted one of the most surprising experiments of the 20th century, the PEAR Lab, Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Project. They used random number generators, machines designed to produce completely unpredictable sequences with no pattern whatsoever. Then, they asked participants to mentally influence the outcomes, intending for more zeros or more ones to appear. In theory, this should have been impossible. Yet after millions of trials and statistical records, the data revealed a striking result. The human mind slightly but consistently altered the machine's behavior. The mathematical probability of this happening by chance was virtually zero. The conclusion was unavoidable. Focused consciousness can modify the behavior of matter, even at a distance. Thought, sustained with intention and attention, produces a measurable effect in the physical world. The implications are enormous. If your mind can influence a random number generator, what could it do within the living fabric of your daily reality? Every time you focus your attention on something, a goal, a person, an emotion, you are interacting with the energetic field that composes it. Attention is the key that opens the door between thought and manifestation. Most people scatter their attention in 1,000 directions: worries, distractions, complaints, news, comparisons. Their energy fragments into fleeting, contradictory thoughts. Then they wonder why their results are confused. The scattered mind does not create, it merely reacts. The focused mind, on the other hand, transforms. The Roman philosopher Seneca expressed it with the practical wisdom of one who understood the human soul. The world is changed by your example, not by your opinion. We can interpret it more deeply. The world doesn't change because of what you think superficially, but because of what you embody through sustained attention. Words are air, but attention is fire. It's not enough to have opinions about life. You must direct conscious energy toward it. When you give true attention, you don't merely observe. You merge with what is observed. At that point, the separation between you and the object dissolves, and the possibility of transformation arises. The ancient alchemists knew this principle under symbols that now seem enigmatic. In Hermetic Alexandria, they said that lead was solidified thought. They were not speaking merely of material alchemy, but of mental alchemy. Lead symbolized dense, heavy, repetitive ideas, limiting beliefs that crystallize into matter, into destiny. Gold, on the other hand, represented the mind purified by conscious attention, elevated thought transformed into tangible wisdom. Alchemy, more than a science of metals, was a science of consciousness. To transmute lead into gold was to transmute distraction into presence, fear into purpose, confusion into clarity. In modern terms, we could say, to turn unconscious thoughts into focused energy. Imagine your attention as a beam of light. If you scatter it, it illuminates little. If you concentrate it, it can cut through metal. That is how the trained mind works. When you learn to hold your focus on an idea, a project, or an emotion, you generate vibrational coherence, and that coherence attracts equivalent experiences. Reality does not respond to fleeting desires, but to the constant frequency of your attention. The brain confirms this. Studies in neuroplasticity show that neural networks strengthen through repeated focus. What you mentally observe again and again becomes more real, more automatic, more dominant in your perception. If you focus your mind on scarcity, Your reticular system, the brain's attention filter, prioritizes everything that confirms that belief. If you focus it on opportunity, it begins to detect possibilities where it once saw obstacles. Your attention literally reconfigures your perception of the world. This explains why people who practice meditation or conscious visualization often experience synchronicities. Their sustained attention acts like a magnet that organizes information in the quantum field to produce meaningful coincidences. What seems like chance to others is, for the conscious observer, the natural consequence of focus. But there is a crucial difference between controlling attention and directing it with presence. Control implies effort and tension. Direction means flowing with intention. The most powerful attention is not the one that struggles to remain fixed, but the one fully surrendered to what it observes. When you are completely present, your energy becomes pure, free from the interference of fear or impatience. And that purity is the vibration that moves mountains. The problem is that we live in a culture of distraction. Everything competes for your gaze: screens, notifications, noise, urgency. The entire system seems designed to steal your attention, because whoever controls your attention controls your energy, and whoever controls your energy controls your world. Regaining mastery of your attention is, therefore, an act of spiritual sovereignty. Start by noticing what you think about when you're not thinking about anything. That automatic stream of worries and fantasies is the mold of your reality. If you can observe it without being carried away, little by little you can direct it. And when you consciously choose where to place your attention, on gratitude, on solutions, on peace, you begin to rebuild the universe from within. Every person who learns to focus their mind becomes a transformer of energy. Their environment changes, relationships balance, opportunities appear. Not because of magic, but because energy follows the direction of attention. Just as a lens concentrates light to ignite fire, your conscious focus ignites the dormant possibilities of the quantum field. The Hermetic principle expressed it in another way. Thought follows desire, and desire follows attention. Creation moves in that sequence. What you attend to awakens desire. Desire awakens thought, and thought organizes reality. If you interrupt attention, jumping from one idea to another, from one fear to another, you break the creative circuit. That is why true discipline is not physical effort or external struggle, but the constancy of inner focus. Each time you choose to keep your mental gaze on what you want instead of what you fear, you refine the lead of distraction into the gold of consciousness. Ultimately, the universe responds to the degree of attention you offer it. It's not about forcing reality, but inviting it. Conscious attention is a form of love. It tells the universe, "This matters to me." And the universe, like a sensitive mirror, responds by multiplying what you acknowledge as important. Seneca was right. The world does not change through opinions, but through examples. And the most powerful example you can give is not what you do, but the quality of your presence while doing it. Where you place your attention, you place your soul. And where you place your soul, matter organizes itself. Thus, every moment becomes an alchemical act, transforming the invisible into the visible, the potential into the real, the mental into the tangible. Your attention is the bridge between the two worlds, because the secret of all creation lies not in force, nor in chance, nor in talent. It lies in your gaze, and your gaze, when it becomes conscious, creates worlds. Chapter 7. The Body as a Mirror of the Mind. If you've ever felt a knot in your stomach before speaking in public, or a weight in your chest after an argument, You already know the essential truth of this chapter. The body is the voice of the mind when the mind dares not speak. Every emotion, every thought left unexpressed or misunderstood seeks a physical channel through which to manifest. Not a single cell in your body stands apart from what you think and feel. Biology is the mirror of consciousness. The Taoist sages understood this more than 2,000 years ago. In the Neye, one of the oldest texts of Chinese philosophy, it is written, "A sustained emotion is a thought made flesh." This phrase, as poetic as it is precise, describes how the mind imprints its content onto living matter. Every prolonged emotion leaves a biochemical trace, an energetic imprint that the body translates into tensions, postures, habits, or, if held too long, into illness. Modern science has confirmed this with astonishing accuracy. Today we know that every thought produces a cascade of chemical reactions, neurotransmitters, hormones, and electrical signals that travel throughout the body. Thinking with fear activates the amygdala and releases cortisol. Thinking with gratitude stimulates dopamine and oxytocin. Your thoughts are not just abstract ideas, they are instructions the body executes in real time. But the most surprising discovery is that this relationship is not one way. Just as the mind influences the body can transform the mind. Your posture, your breathing, or the tone of your voice send messages to the brain, shaping your emotions. The body is a visible mind, and the mind an invisible body, two poles of the same consciousness vibrating in harmony. The story of Phineas Gage, one of neuroscience's most studied cases, vividly illustrates this connection. In 1848, Gage was a young railroad foreman in Vermont when an accidental explosion sent an iron rod through his skull, damaging part of his frontal lobe. Miraculously, he survived, but something profound changed in him. Before the accident, he was kind, responsible, and balanced. Afterward, he became impulsive, irritable, and crude. His body remained alive, but his personality had radically changed. Scientists realized then that the mind was not an ethereal entity separate from the body, but a process intimately linked to the physical brain. Yet later studies revealed that the relationship was even more complex. It was not only the brain creating the mind, but also the mind modulating the brain's function. Gage's case opened the door to understanding that identity, emotion, and physiology are intertwined. Every emotional trauma leaves a neurological trace. Every repeated thought shapes neural wiring. Today, we know that the brain continuously changes according to what you think, imagine, or feel. It is a plastic, malleable organ in constant dialogue with your consciousness. An inspiring example of this dialogue between mind and body is the story of Gustav Fechner, a 19th-century German physicist and philosopher considered one of the fathers of modern psychology. After damaging his eyesight from overuse of optical instruments, Fechner was left nearly blind. Doctors advised him to rest and resign himself to his fate, but he chose to challenge the diagnosis. Every morning, for an entire year, he visualized a golden light entering his eyes. He did not do it as a mechanical exercise, but with deep faith in the possibility of healing. Gradually, his sight began to improve until it was completely restored. From that experience, Fechner developed the conviction that the mind actively influences the body and the physical world. He called this principle psychophysics, the science of the relationship between mind and matter. Today we might say that Fechner practiced an early form of neuroplasticity and quantum visualization. His concentrated attention on health reorganized the energy of his body until the damaged function was restored. His story shows that mental images are not mere fantasies, They are vibrational blueprints that the body strives to follow. Yet the mind doesn't always need organs to feel. In modern medicine, there is a perplexing phenomenon known as phantom limb syndrome. People who have lost an arm or a leg report feeling itching, pain, or movement in that missing limb. The brain, unable to find the physical extremity, continues to project its internal map, as if the mind refused to accept physical loss. This phenomenon teaches us something fundamental. The body you perceive is not purely physical, it is also mental. Your brain maintains an energetic representation of every part of you, an internal hologram that defines the boundaries of your bodily identity. Even when matter disappears, the mind preserves the form. This reveals that the body is not merely a collection of tissues, but an image sustained by consciousness. If the mind can retain a part that no longer exists, it can also regenerate or transform those that still do. Numerous studies on spontaneous healing show that in states of deep emotional coherence, the body activates repair mechanisms that science is only beginning to understand. The mind does not heal the body from the outside, it reorganizes it from within. Consider for a moment the relationship between your emotions and your physical symptoms. Muscle tension, digestive trouble, headaches, or hormonal imbalances are rarely accidents. They are messages. The body expresses what the mind suppresses. If you repress anger, the liver becomes overloaded. If you live in constant fear, the lungs tighten. If you refuse to release control, the neck and back bear the burden. Every organ is a translator of emotions, and every symptom a line in the dialogue between mind and body. Eastern energetic medicine explained this millennia ago. The meridians, or channels through which vital energy flows, become blocked when a thought repeats without resolution. It is no coincidence that an emotion gets stuck in a specific part of the body. Each area resonates with a type of thought. Healing, therefore, does not consist only in eliminating the symptom, but in understanding the message it carries. The body is an honest mirror. It does not judge or lie. It simply reflects your inner state. If you listen, it can teach you more about yourself than any book or teacher. The problem is that we have learned to treat it like a machine, forgetting that it is a conscious manifestation. We burden it with demands, medicate it, punish it with guilt, or decorate it to hide what we feel. But the body, patient and wise, continues to speak, and when you refuse to listen, it shouts in the form of pain. In truth, the body does not become ill to punish you, but to awaken you. Illness, seen from a broader perspective, is an attempt at balance, a signal that something in your mind needs to be acknowledged. When you attend to that signal consciously, the body returns to its natural harmony. The power of the mind over the body is not a mystical mystery, but a biological law. Your nervous system, immune system, and cells are in constant communication with your thoughts. Every mental image creates a physiological response. If you imagine delicious food, you salivate. If you recall an offense, your heart races. And if you visualize health, joy, or light, your cells begin to resonate with that information. The challenge is to maintain that coherence long enough. A fleeting emotion is not enough to transform the body. What is required is a sustained emotion, what the Nye called a thought-made body, held with faith and calm. That constancy is what reprograms biology. Gustav Fechner proved it with his eyesight. Thousands of patients confirm it when they heal after a change in consciousness, and modern physics supports it by affirming that energy follows attention. Your body is not a prison. It is the screen upon which the mind projects its film. Change the script, and the image changes. The body is your most intimate mirror, but also your most loyal ally. You cannot escape it, nor can you deceive it for long. That is why, instead of fighting against its symptoms, You can learn to converse with them. Every sensation is a message from the soul asking to be heard. And when you listen, the body responds with gratitude. It relaxes, aligns, heals. There is no separation between mind and body. There is only a flow of consciousness expressed in different densities. The mind vibrates as thought, the body vibrates as matter. Between the two unfolds the dance of existence, and perhaps the secret of health lies not in adding anything, but in remembering this. Every time you think, you are writing in the language of the body, and every time you feel, the body is answering in the voice of the mind. Chapter 8. The Alchemy of Thought. There exists a laboratory more subtle and powerful than any alchemist's tower or modern reactor, the human mind. In it, emotions are the fires, beliefs are the metals, and thoughts are the substances that transform one another. True alchemy is not about turning lead into gold, but about transmuting inner states, raising the density of fear into the lightness of wisdom, and the rigidity of doubt into the fluidity of understanding. The ancients knew this. In Egyptian temples and Sufi schools alike, alchemy was a science of the soul disguised as a metallurgical art. The philosopher's stone was not an object, but a state of consciousness capable of transforming every experience into knowledge. The fire of the furnace was none other than the energy of attention, the crucible, the mind of the practitioner. A Coptic Gnostic proverb expresses this truth with luminous precision. The unseen thought is the seed of visible destiny. That is, what you sustain within, though no one perceives it, will eventually bloom in your experience. Unmanifested thought becomes, in time, matter, circumstance, destiny. The art of inner alchemy lies in recognizing those seeds before they sprout and transforming them consciously. Every belief, every emotion, every memory acts like a metal awaiting refinement. Fear is lead, heavy, dark, dense. Understanding is gold, radiant, light, pure. But no metal transforms into another on its own. It requires fire, and that fire is consciousness. Only conscious observation, free of judgment, can melt mental structures and release their energy. In the Sufi tradition, Mercury symbolized the liquid mind, mobile, reflective, able to mirror reality without distortion. The alchemist said that whoever learned to think like Mercury, without attachment, without rigidity, could reflect divine truth as it is. When the mind freezes into fixed beliefs, it loses its power to transform, but when it flows, everything becomes possible. Mercury has a fascinating property. It cannot be divided or confined. It adapts to any shape and always reunites into a single mass. So it is with consciousness. When it does not cling to emotions or thoughts, it can pass through any experience without breaking. The alchemy of thought begins when you realize that you are not your thoughts, but the consciousness that observes them. That consciousness is the laboratory where transmutation occurs. First, you recognize the metal. Identify the limiting thought or dense emotion. Then, you apply the fire. Observe it attentively, without resistance or justification. Finally, you allow it to melt into its essence, until from that raw matter arises a higher understanding. Repeated with patience and love, this process turns suffering into wisdom. The Arab Hermetists expanded this vision with a poetic and profound idea. The air remembers words. They believed that every spoken word was imprinted upon the atmosphere, vibrating eternally as a sound wave that never dies. If that is true, then we live inside an ocean of spoken thought, a subtle archive of all human history. Think of what that means. Your words do not disappear. They leave traces. Every conversation, every phrase, every verbalized thought contributes to the collective field. And that field, in turn, influences everyone's mind. This is why the masters of Hermeticism insisted on the purity of speech. To speak truth, they said, is to cleanse the air. To lie is to pollute it. In modern terms, your words are vibrations that program your environment. Every yes or no, every affirmation or complaint is a frequency the universe records. When you speak from fear, you reinforce fear. When you speak from faith, you invite possibility. Verbal alchemy is one of the most powerful forms because it transforms not only your mind, but also the collective mind. But the alchemy of thought goes beyond words. It also includes the art of silence. The Indian sage Nisargadatta Maharaj said, "Silence is the highest answer of thought." And he was right. Silence is not the absence of thought, but its transmutation. The moment when the fire of attention has consumed all the heavy metals of the mind, leaving only the pure gold of consciousness. In inner silence, ideas stop colliding and merge into understanding. There is no struggle between what is and what should be. There is only presence. That silence cannot be forced. It arises naturally when the need to control or comprehend subsides. It is the point where thought dissolves back into its source, and in that space, alchemy completes itself. Fear becomes wisdom, pain becomes compassion, doubt becomes faith. Most people try to change their lives from the surface, manipulating circumstances. But true alchemy begins in the unseen. You cannot transform outer gold unless you have purified the inner lead. As long as your thoughts revolve around fear, the world will mirror it. When you shift the inner frequency, matter obeys. This process does not require force, only understanding. Consciousness does not fight shadows. It illuminates them. And once that light is lit, it cannot be extinguished. That is the essence of the alchemy of thought. To use consciousness as a purifying fire that melts dense emotions and beliefs into luminous understanding. The alchemists described 3 stages of this process. 1. Nigredo, the blackening, recognizing inner conflict, mental chaos, emotional density. 2. Albedo, the whitening, observing with purity, releasing judgment, allowing light to enter. 3. Rubedo, the reddening, the union of the spiritual and the material, the rebirth of thought in its highest form. These stages are metaphors for inner growth. Every crisis is a nigredo, every moment of clarity an albedo, and every deep realization a rubedo. The alchemy of the soul is a continuous cycle. We are always transmuting something, even when we don't notice. When you think with resentment, the air around you thickens. When you think with love, it becomes lighter. If we could see the energetic field surrounding us, we would notice how our emotions change the colors and shapes of the space we inhabit. In a sense, every thought is a chemical wave, and every emotion a dye coloring the atmosphere around us. That is why silence is the alchemist's final step. Not because he renounces thought, but because his thought has become so transparent that it no longer interferes. It is the mental mercury in its purest state, reflection without distortion. From that point, reality is perceived exactly as it is, and the outer world becomes a clear mirror of the soul. At heart, we are all alchemists. Every time you choose to understand rather than react, you are distilling emotion. Every time you turn criticism into self-awareness or a wound into gratitude, you are transmuting lead into gold. No laboratory is needed, only an attentive mind and a willing heart. The alchemy of thought does not seek to escape the world, but to refine it from within. Every kind word purifies the air. Every conscious silence clears the mind. Every elevated thought raises the frequency of the whole. And when you sustain that frequency, something magical happens. The universe, which was always your reflection, begins to shine with a new light. You no longer see chaos or coincidence, but correspondence. Everything makes sense because everything is part of the alchemical process that carries you from unconsciousness to clarity. In the end, the gold that alchemists sought was not a metal, but a pure consciousness, free of fear and judgment. And when you reach that state, you understand that there is nothing to transform, for everything, even the darkest, was always light in the process of remembering its origin. Chapter 9. The Mind That Imagines the Future. Everything that has ever existed in the physical world, a city, a work of art, a technology, a relationship, was first born in the invisible space of the mind. Before becoming a thing, it was an image, an intention, an emotion. Imagination is not an escape from the present. It is the workshop where possible futures are designed. In that sense, to imagine is the most sacred creative act we possess. A thought projected into the future is like a seed cast into the quantum field. You don't know when it will sprout, but if you nourish it with emotion and faith, it will inevitably bloom. That is why every authentic visualization requires two essential ingredients: mental clarity and emotional intensity. The first draws the blueprint, the second provides the energy that turns it into reality. The ancients knew that the mind could shape destiny. In the monasteries of Tibet, the monks of dream yoga trained their consciousness to remain awake even while asleep. They learned to direct their dreams, to create landscapes, objects, and encounters in that dreamlike space. But the purpose was not entertainment, it was mastery over inner reality. They believed that if one could awaken within a dream, one could also awaken within life. For them, the physical world was a denser dream, an extension of the collective mind. If they could modify the nocturnal dream with intention and lucidity, they could also modify the daytime destiny. This practice was not metaphorical, they truly used it to rehearse their future. Before undertaking an important action or making a vital decision, they visualized its outcome for entire nights, feeling every detail until it became real in their minds. Then, when the physical moment arrived, reality seemed to obey the image they had planted. Today, modern science is beginning to understand the mechanism behind that ancient wisdom. Studies on neuroplasticity and visualization show that the brain does not distinguish between a real experience and one imagined with sufficient emotional intensity. When you visualize something in detail, the sound, the color, the sensation, the same neural areas are activated as if you were actually living it. In biological terms, you are already creating that reality within you. That is why imagining is not purposeless daydreaming. It is rehearsing the future until the mind and body recognize it as familiar. And when an idea becomes familiar, the brain seeks to confirm it in the physical world. In other words, the mind creates the model, and the body seeks the stage to fit it. But for this creation to work, visualization must be accompanied by an elevated emotion. Emotion is the signal your body sends to the quantum field, the frequency that carries the message. If you imagine prosperity but feel fear, the field receives the vibration of fear, not that of abundance. If you visualize health while holding on to anxiety, the energy becomes distorted. Only when you think and feel in coherence is the message clear. The poet Rumi expressed it with a tenderness that still resonates centuries later. The universe begins to listen to you when you begin to listen to yourself. You cannot create from confusion or haste. The mind needs silence to hear its own voice. When you stop fighting what is and begin to listen to what you truly desire, your intention aligns with the universal flow. Then creation ceases to be effort and becomes cooperation. This idea was also explored by some of the most rational minds of the 20th century. During the Apollo 14 mission, astronauts Edgar Mitchell and his crewmates carried out a quiet, almost secret experiment. They practiced collective meditation in space. For a few minutes of weightlessness, they connected their minds with Earth, visualizing peace and clarity for humanity. Upon returning, Mitchell reported a series of synchronicities that occurred during and after the experiment, as if space itself had responded to their intention. That moment marked the beginning of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, dedicated to studying the interaction between consciousness and reality. His testimony aligned with what many ancient traditions had long known. Collective consciousness can alter the fabric of the world. If this happens on a large scale, it also happens personally. Every thought you hold is a conversation with the universe. As an old 17th century Japanese Zen aphorism says, "Thinking is conversing with the universe." When you think with fear, the conversation fills with silence and doubt. When you think with love and presence, the universe replies with clarity. The mind that imagines is not talking to itself. It is dialoguing with the energy that surrounds you, a sensitive energy that reacts to emotional coherence. Effective visualization, then, does not consist of forcing repeated images, but of feeling the reality you desire as if it already existed. It is not about convincing yourself with words, but about vibrating in the frequency of the outcome. If you can sustain that vibration long enough, the universe begins to reorganize circumstances in your favor, not by magic, but by resonance. The process can be compared to tuning a radio station. The possibilities were always there, but you only hear the one that matches your frequency. Your thoughts are the tuning knob, your emotions, the signal. The more precise the tuning, the clearer the transmission. Yet, there is an aspect many forget. Imagining the future is not about imposing it. It is not about controlling life, but co-creating with it. If you try to visualize from fear or a need to dominate, you introduce noise into the signal. The universe does not respond to demand, but to harmony. That is why the Tibetan monks did not visualize specific outcomes. They visualized states of the soul, compassion, clarity, balance. They knew that if those states were real within them, the outer destiny would organize itself. Pure intention does not seek to possess, but to express. It does not arise from egoic desire, but from the impulse to expand life. When you imagine the future from that purity, your energy becomes magnetic. Opportunities, people, and synchronicities begin to appear like pieces of a puzzle that was already designed, simply waiting for you to remember it. People often ask, "What if I imagine something and it doesn't happen?" But the universe does not measure time with our clocks. Every intention has its rhythm, and every vibration its moment of resonance. Sometimes the future delays because the one imagining it must first transform. You cannot attract a reality of abundance while still vibrating in scarcity. The mind creates, yes, but it can only sustain that with which it is in coherence. Imagine a garden. You can plant a seed today, but you cannot pull on the plant to make it grow. You can only care for the soil, the water, and the light. Visualization is that care, watering your intention with emotion, nurturing it with silence and patience. Time is not an obstacle, it is part of the alchemical process that turns idea into experience. The greatest creators, from scientists to artists, have used this principle without knowing it. Nikola Tesla said he built nothing without first visualizing it working perfectly in his mind. Beethoven heard his symphonies before writing them. Each of them practiced a natural form of conversation with the universe, translating the invisible into the audible, the mental into the tangible. But the act of imagining should not be limited to the personal. When you imagine a wiser, more compassionate, more harmonious future for all, you are participating in collective evolution. Mental images are waves that travel farther than we think. Every luminous thought you emit joins a field of possibilities that others can tune into. This is how eras of change are born, not through revolutions of force, but through revolutions of vision. The power of imagination does not lie in escaping reality, but in expanding it. Every time you close your eyes and see a better future, you are drawing a path that humanity can follow. Not everyone will walk it, but the path remains open. In the end, the universe does not respond to your words, but to your vibration. And the highest vibration is born from coherence between thought, emotion, and action. When you imagine, feel, and act in the same direction, creation becomes inevitable. So the next time you catch yourself daydreaming, don't apologize for it. That dream may be the most important conversation you're having with the universe, because, as the Zen masters say, every thought is a message that reality listens to with attention. And when you finally listen to yourself, the universe, which has always been waiting for your voice, responds with an unmistakable echo, the future you imagine beginning to take shape before your eyes. Chapter 10. Awakening. The Conscious Creator. There comes a point along the path where understanding is no longer enough, and true transformation begins. You have learned that thought shapes reality, that emotion is energy vibrating within your body, that attention directs the flow of what is possible, and that the mind imagines futures the universe responds to. But there is a step beyond all that, awakening as a conscious creator. Awakening does not mean acquiring new powers. It means remembering the ones you always had. It means accepting, with serenity and humility, that every moment of your life, from joys to wounds, has been a projection of your own consciousness in dialogue with the universe. It is recognizing that there is no separation between you and what is created, that the observer and the observed are the same mind unfolded in different forms. The Neoplatonic philosopher Proclus summed it up in a phrase as beautiful as it is precise. When the soul moves, the world obeys. It is not the body that transforms the environment, nor even the isolated thought, but the soul, that silent core where thought, emotion, and will merge in a single direction. When that core aligns, the universe responds like a mirror that has finally found its center. To be a conscious creator is to live from that inner coherence. You no longer act out of reaction nor create from lack, but from wholeness. You do not seek to change the world in order to feel good. You feel good in order to see the world change. Your energy ceases to depend on external results and becomes the source that generates them. The ancient Hermetic masters called this the axiom of the soul. What you believe, you create. To believe, in its deepest sense, is not to think something intellectually, but to feel it as real with your entire being. Belief is not waiting. It is inhabiting the frequency of what is desired before seeing it manifested. That is the difference between wanting and creating. Desire comes from lack. Creation comes from the consciousness of abundance. When a belief is infused with emotion and sustained by coherent action, it becomes a structuring force of reality. It is not magic, it is the physics of the mind. Energy follows intention, and matter follows energy. That is why awakening is not about controlling reality, but aligning yourself with the flow of creation itself. One of the most fascinating examples of this connection between mind and manifestation is found in the figure of Eileen Garrett, an Irish medium who, in the 1930s, was the subject of rigorous studies at Duke University. Unlike many sensationalized cases, Garrett was examined by skeptical scientists seeking objective evidence of psychic phenomena. During the experiments, she was asked to describe cards, words, or symbols she could not see. Her accuracy far exceeded statistical probability. In later trials, she even demonstrated the ability to transmit information at a distance with astonishing precision. Researchers concluded that her mind seemed to connect to a non-local field of information, a domain where thoughts intertwine beyond space and time. Beyond the extraordinary nature of the phenomenon, her case reminds us of something essential. Consciousness is not confined to the brain. When your mind becomes still and open, it can perceive and create at levels that ordinary logic cannot reach. Garrett did not guess. She tuned in. And that is exactly what the conscious creator does, tunes into the frequency of the reality they wish to manifest. In Eastern traditions, this state is known as the unity of mind and universe. Tantric Buddhism expresses it in a verse that contains centuries of wisdom. The universe is the mind dreaming that it thinks. Everything you see is universal thought in motion. But the dream is not an illusion. It is continuous creation, a dance between infinite consciousness and its own reflection. When you awaken within that dream, you discover that you yourself are part of the mind that dreams it. And in realizing this, fear disappears, because nothing outside you can threaten you. The awakening of the conscious creator is the culmination of the human mind's journey. It is not about becoming invulnerable, but transparent, allowing the light of consciousness to flow without resistance. Energy no longer accumulates as desire, guilt, or control, but circulates freely as pure intention. Life becomes a work of art in real time, where every thought is a brushstroke and every emotion a color. Conscious creation is not about manipulating matter, but about harmonizing with the melody of the universe. In that state, coincidences cease to be surprises and become conversations. You know that what arrives is exact, that every experience has meaning. Doubt dissolves because you understand you are within the design, not outside of it. How does one live like this in daily life? Not through effort, but through presence. Presence is the instrument of the conscious creator. When you are fully here, thought does not scatter into past or future. It becomes a ray of pure energy. And wherever you place that ray, the universe blossoms. This is the art of inner coherence, to think with clarity, feel with gratitude, and act with love. 3 simple gestures that, combined, open the door to creative power. When you think with clarity, you define purpose. When you feel with gratitude, you generate frequency. When you act with love, you materialize energy. This is the trinity of the conscious creator: idea, vibration, and action. The modern world, saturated with mental noise, needs more than ever people who live from that coherence, not as isolated mystics, but as everyday beacons. A conscious creator does not impose their light, they simply radiate it. And that light, by resonance, awakens others. Because awakening is not an individual act, it is a silent contagion. Every mind aligned with inner truth helps the universe remember its own clarity. You do not have to convince anyone or change the world. You simply have to be the clear channel through which the universe recognizes itself. When the mind stops fighting reality and begins to flow with it, something astonishing happens. Thought ceases to be a mechanism of control and becomes an art of collaboration. You create not because you want to possess, but because you wish to participate in the miracle of existence, and that miracle responds. Life begins to move at your rhythm. Decisions arrive in synchrony, the right people appear, doors open effortlessly, not because you are attracting things, but because you have become the channel through which the intelligence of the universe expresses itself. The conscious creator does not ask, "What can I get?" but "What wants to be expressed through me?" From that humility, creation becomes service, and service becomes joy. There is no longer separation between the art of living and life itself. When you reach that point, you understand that true power lies not in controlling destiny, but in loving it. Because by loving the present, you transform it. The soul moves, and the world obeys. Awakening is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a new way of existing, that of one who remembers that every thought is a note of the universe, and that every note can resonate in harmony when played with consciousness. You have arrived at the threshold where thought and creation are one. You are no longer a dreamer lost in the mind of the universe. You are the mind of the universe awakened, dreaming with eyes wide open. You've been listening to The Effect of Your Thoughts on Your Reality, an original work created by Oscar Gonzalez for Biblio Studio. Dear listener, thank you so much for joining us. With warm regards and many blessings.